I think they've done a very commendable job in terms of communicating, setting up the guidelines for our level 1 and the whole process by which foreign travelers visit. And it was viewed as a kind of a benchmark by other countries who followed suit in terms of creating these bio bubbles. And then similarly, we created these bio bubbles with India. So really, tourism has been, from a foreign tourism perspective, we've been open since February of 21. So it's been, if you look at the regional destinations, it's probably been the most mature, apart from the Maldives, which obviously has its natural advantages, one island, one hotel. But in terms of a single contiguous country, I think we were the first to open.
Hi, travel diners. Welcome today to a conversation with Mr. Malik Fernando, who's at the forefront of hospitality and tourism in Sri Lanka. Managing Director of Resplendent Ceylon, which is a group of luxury resorts across the country. They have a tie-up with Relais and Chateaux, so very prestigious. Also, he's a second generation current director of Dilmah Tea. His father started the brand and luxury teas which are familiar the world over. He's also a director on SriLankan Airlines. He's been very, very instrumental in bringing together the hospitality industry as a whole in Sri Lanka, and someone who's right there poised to make the country of Sri Lanka a global destination. People are discovering it, and he is so passionate about the country. We're looking forward to listening to him about everything that this beautiful jewel in the sea has to offer. And so welcome, Mr. Fernando. Thank you for joining us on TravelDine. Yes, let's get started. Dilmah is such a global brand with great recall. I just wanted to check, how it's been growing up with Dilmah. It's in the family, and you've not only been part of the Dilmah brand but created your own Resplendent Ceylon. So there's so much that's happening with your family. So just wanted to kind of get a little insight into how the family works, thinks, and what it was growing up. Yeah,
Absolutely. That's a very long question covering a span of almost 50 years. So I'll try my best to do it justice. Sure. First of all, I'd like to say, Priya, I'm delighted to be on your show and to be the first Sri Lankan guest. Hopefully, many more to follow. So Dilmah, the brand Dilmah is made up from my brother's name Dilhan and my name Malik. So that's how it came about, and it's it's really been a labor of love and passion. My father, Merrill, who is now at the ripe age of 92, was selling bulk tea to so many countries around the world until the 50s. And then he realized, after so many decades of seeing Ceylon tea being blended by brands overseas and mixed with so many other origins, I'm going to start my own brand. And so when he started it, my brother and I had a ringside seat because we were late teens at that point. So it started very, very small. I still remember how the brand was, the brand name was sketched, how we did the first shoot using antiquated equipment in the garden of our house, and then how it grew from there, purely driven by my father's passion. And then, we sponsored the Sri Lankan cricket team. We now sell in about 110 countries around the world, Emirates, Qatar. So many of the international airlines have Dilmah tea menus on board. So, I've literally had a ringside seat, my brother and I, and it's really been wonderful to see my father's dream when he was a young man. And really, I think he was one of the first Sri Lankans ever to enter the arena of tea tasting in Sri Lanka, because the British back then claimed that Sri Lankans couldn't taste tea because, they ate too much curry. So, he really put paid to that canard. So, from Dilmah came sort of foray into leisure, because I saw these beautiful colonial tea planters' houses, which from the 1850s and so on, which were, falling into, fairly shabby condition. So we decided to restore 5 of them in the end. and created this circuit of very special Relais Chateaux lodges that dot these beautiful emerald tea fields. So that's how the tea and how the brand developed and how we went into initially tea tourism. And from there, it was so well received. Guests who left us and went elsewhere in Sri Lanka said, I've not been able to replicate your, very sort of homely, it's almost like in a wealthy tea planter's uncle's house that I'm spending the weekend in. And we just couldn't replicate that at the beach or wherever else. So we decided, why don't we continue cautiously? So we created Cape Weligama, which is our coastal resort near Galle, and Wild Coast Tented Lodge, which is an amazing design-led safari lodge in Yala, with a few more to come, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So that's kind of, in 5 minutes, is fast forwarding to where we are right now.
Sure. Also, why don't you perhaps tell us a little bit about the Relais and Chateaux connection? I mean, how it happened, because they're so choosy about the properties that they kind of take under their umbrella. So how did that happen?
Absolutely. So, I mean, Relais Chateaux, I had heard about this. I was in awe of that association, because you've got in there, it started out in Paris. It was largely French-based, but now there are about 500 properties and Michelin-starred restaurants in that association. And I was in awe of it because, all the top chefs are in there, and you've got some beautiful chateaus and castles and country houses in Relais. And then after we developed Tea Trails, lo and behold, they contacted us and said, your property is worthy of Relais. They'd already done a mystery guest visit because they're very, very demanding. And we passed the test, and they invited us to be the first Relais in the country. And, I was delighted. And now there are only 3, and all 3 are my properties, because we really subscribe to the values of family, of partnership, of provenance, of, authenticity, and being a non-corporate kind of property. And that really is, it's been a rewarding partnership with Relais. And we have so many like-minded partners, many in India. There are about 10 or 12 Relais properties in India. Some of them I've been to, others I'd like to visit, and, around the world. So it really is Relais, and their manifesto and their vision for tourism really resonates with me, and Resplendent Ceylon, which is the name for our little collection of boutique properties.
Also, Relais is very kind of food forward, food focused. So do you have any special culinary offering at all your properties that you'd like to talk about?
Each of the properties, I mean, typically guests would stay, Priya. It's, I'm delighted that you have people coming from as far afield as the United States who will come just for us. They'll come to Sri Lanka, but they'll stay just with us. They'll do the route de bonheur, is the route of happiness, as Relais calls it. And when they're tea trails, they'll experience a very unique style of cuisine for, relevant to that local area. At Wild Coast, we do a lot of foraging in the area directly around the resort, similarly at Cape Weligama. So our cuisine is about modern Sri Lankan, where you have uniquely Sri Lankan ingredients, but it's a melding of East and West, because Sri Lanka really is a melting pot, because we've been colonized by the Portuguese and the Dutch and the English. So it really is a kind of a mishmash, is not the right word, but it really is a melting pot of beautiful cuisine with influences from across the world. It's very different from Indian cuisine. As your listeners who've been here know, it's more, it's lighter, it's more coconut, turmeric, cinnamon based at my Relais Chateaux properties in Sri Lanka, but something that's authentic Sri Lankan but presented in a modern style. So our food really is phenomenal, and as you say, all the Relais properties have an amazing gourmet offering.
Most of your guests, I mean, would you say that they're largely international, or do you have a lot of local guests as well?
Local was fairly small, maybe 2-3%, but thanks or no thanks to the pandemic, we've grown a substantial local clientele, and these are clients who would, travel overseas to maybe Dubai or Australia or Vietnam or UK for their holidays. It's still a small element of our traveler base. The majority are, I would say, from the United Kingdom, from the United States, from Europe, Australia. China currently is closed. India has been a growing segment for the last few years. It's about 8%. And I think it could well pip 10%. And because of the proximity and the number of flights, for Indians to come and stay at our resorts 2-3 times a year is totally feasible. They might come and do all three or stay at one. So it's really, I would say, so-called Anglo-Saxon would amount to about 50-55, and the others from the region. So it really is pretty broad-based. We honestly, we appeal to travelers from anywhere who want, particularly post-pandemic, people want corporate, non-city, rural locations, almost like they've gone home. They want privacy, and they want really to be cut off. They want rural, rustic retreats, which rejuvenate and recharge. We're seeing a lot of multi-generational travelers, grandkids traveling with, grandparents traveling with grandkids, and they really want to connect with nature because so many people have been cooped up, for almost 2 years in apartments and houses.
So have you created some new offerings for this particular segment? I mean, I know you do your escapes, which sounded really enticing, long stays, but anything other than that? Or maybe you can tell us a little bit about escapes as well.
Yeah, we do. So what happens is that in each of the resorts, we've got amazing experiences curated by our own team. So whether it's rangers at Wild Coast, naturalists at Tea Trails, or marine biologists at Cape Veligama, or our chefs that help guests discover Sri Lankan cuisine. When you come to the resort, I mean, you're very comfortable. The hardware, software, all that has to be very, very good. But it's all about connecting with a guest curator, which is a roving concierge, who essentially helps you plan your day. You don't walk up to a desk and say, what should I do? But essentially, you have someone who curates your stay on a daily basis and tells you what we can offer, from excursions, things to do with the resort, in the resort, or in the local area. So we've created a series of journeys that focus around culinary. And because our guests stay typically at all three resorts, we can have them for as long as 14 days in some cases. At each of the resorts, we give them a different experience. We kind of curate their journey. So it can be someone who really wants to, master Sri Lankan cuisine, someone who wants to know, who's a birder, who's, really fascinated by the amazing bird life we have in this country, and the type of birding we have in the different resorts. It varies from location to location, because Sri Lanka, it really is an underrated gem. It's a continent's worth of attractions in a very compact island. So it's probably the size of Greater Mumbai, I don't know, Maharashtra in terms of the proportions, but it's tiny. It's 400 by 200 kilometers. So within that, typically people would go to 4, 5, 6 areas, because a lot of the old Hollywood movies were filmed here, because we had so many sets that we could provide in terms of the the scenery, the flora and the fauna, the climate. So in each of these zones where we have resorts in the 3 key areas, and we will be covering the other areas with upcoming resorts, we really offer amazing experiences. Whether it's culinary, whether it's connecting with the local people, whether it's art, working with local potters, wildlife and nature naturally, or whether you want to get on a 100-year-old train service and go from one resort to another in one of the most amazing rail journeys. The BBC recently had a program about this train that clatters from Kandy across the tea country, and these are the original trains that transported tea down from the Central Highlands down to Colombo. So it really is an amazing range of experiences that we offer, and we've got guests who sometimes come every year. We've got a couple from the UK who've been coming for 14 years every year, and they say we're coming home. So I'd like to think that we offer something for everybody.
But my question always has been, honestly, a lot of friends, when we've talked about going to Sri Lanka, they say, oh, but it's so much like India. So for the Indian traveler, how do you differentiate, in terms of offerings? Because we have similar natural beauty, we have wildlife, we have the colonial aspect. So how do you kind of position it in a way that, Indian travelers feel like coming to Sri Lanka?
I think it's accessibility. Everything is in a tight, compact space. Mm-hmm. You get a lot of variation within a small area. So you don't have the huge distances that you obviously have in India, being such a large and important country. So I think it's access. I think, so for example, if you're in if you're in Colombo and you want to head down to Galle and Cape Veligama, you can get there in an hour and a half, if you leave at an off-peak time, and you're in a different world altogether. If you want to go from Galle, which is the hub of the Southern Riviera, beautiful beaches, culture, Galle Fort, and you want to go to Wild Coast to see, it's a leopard hotspot, it's 2 hours max on a beautiful highway. And you hop on a seaplane and go to tea trails, it's 30 minutes. So I think one is accessibility, the fact that you have all these different sites in a small area. The other thing is, of course, you don't have the population density that you have in India. So it doesn't mean that we're underpopulated. We're also fairly densely populated by the standards of, you might say, Australia or New Zealand, but it means it's a lot more relaxed. It's not as frantic as in India. It's an island mentality, people are a lot more chilled. So it's not so crazy busy that you have in parts of India. So I think it's a matter of kind of de-stressing and having all of these sites and different climates within close proximity to each other.
So now tell us a little bit about your new resorts coming up. We're very excited to hear about those.
So those are top secret, but I'm going to tell you as long as you don't tell anybody else. So I mean, the thing is that, we're not a corporate. We don't have a sort of massive growth plan. We don't build big hotels. We build little jewels, gems. And I'll never go out of Sri Lanka, because that's why I deliberately called it Resplendent Ceylon, to avoid the temptation. Friends tell me, why don't you build in South India, Vietnam, the Maldives? No. But I want to focus on Sri Lanka and create this beautiful, beautiful circuit. So tea trails is obviously the first one, and then we built Cape Veligama, Wild Coast. So the circuit of 3 covers, 3 key parts. In terms of areas I'd like to be in, where we have omissions, I'm looking at an amazing little jewel in Colombo, the capital city. There are tons of big hotels, beautiful properties, open and opening, but something of a Relais Chateaux standard, I think Colombo could do with. So that's one of the projects I have in the pipeline. And then the most tangible project that is, that's taking a lot of my time is in the cultural triangle. I don't know whether you've been to Sigiriya. Many of your viewers probably have been to the cultural triangle, which is our version of Angkor Wat. And Sigiriya is a 500 AD amazing World Heritage, 200-meter. It's a granite rock plug that just sits out from the plain, and you climb to the very top, and with this amazing palace and pleasure gardens at the top. And that's the most visited part of Sri Lanka. Then you got Polonnaru, Anuradhapura very near there. And we are building a lovely tree house resort very near there, 20 minutes away, which is in an ancient forest. So we're looking at 33 pods, large pods, 75 square meters, and then the suites are 120, all of which are in the sky. They are elevated because I didn't want to touch the forest. So it means that when you walk on the forest, it's untouched. All the significant trees are untouched. Some of them are very unique species, and there's a lot of biodiversity in that area. So for that reason, we are looking at canopy walks and having these raised pods at canopy height, maybe 20 meters. So that's going to be an amazing resort, which is going to be very much design-led, like Wild Coast in Yala. So we're still working on a name for it, but it will open hopefully at the end of 23. But with all these supply chain issues and so on, it's hard to pin down. Then sooner than that, Christmas 22, we are launching a beautiful 13-key beachside resort in Ahungala in Western Sri Lanka. That's between Cape Veligama and Colombo, and this is a beautiful stop for people at the end of their circuit who wants to spend a week at the beach. And this is 2 virtually private beaches and just 13 rooms in a series of villas. And this is going to be a very nice beach house, relaxed style property. And there are a couple of other locations that I'm developing plans for, but those are still at a preliminary stage. I mean, I believe in this country, we're going through some economic trouble related to the pandemic and the fact that tourism, which is very important for this country, has suffered. But tourism is coming back very strongly, I'm happy to say. So we're going to be out of the woods in the next year or so. So tourism is is really a key part of our future. The government has identified it as the thrust industry. We're never going to be a place for heavy industry manufacturing. So tourism services is really the future of this country. And I think my vision for this boutique circuit, which is very, real sense of place, which is very sustainable, light touch, like the property in the cultural triangle in Dabulla, really is the way forward. So I'm hoping that we'll have a circuit of 6 resorts around the country, and guests can, drive or fly between them, and pick and choose depending on their preference, whether they're staying 3 of them or 6 of them. But they'll all be very different. None will be like each other, and they won't be branded. It'll be Wild Coast Tethered Lodge, Cape Peligama. It won't be Resplendent Wild Coast, Resplendent Cape. I'm deliberately trying to be unbranded because I don't want any 2 resorts to be alike.
Well, great plans. We look forward to coming and trying them all out. So,
be my guest.
So I'm glad that you touched on the financial crisis. I mean, I do know that the foreign exchange crisis that's been sort of besetting Sri Lanka. But I think that, where you are, like, Dilma as like a great export brand, and with Resplendent, and also being a director of the airlines, for the country. I think all of these are revenue generating, forex generating industries. So you're right in the center of it all. And so do you have something to say about, do you have sort of a vision, a plan, to kind of regenerate somehow?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is our economic situation is nothing new. It's been coming for, I would say, about a decade or so, because it's become like this because of the pandemic and the slowdown in tourism. Yeah. It's not a new development, but we came to a critical point because of that. But that's starting to turn. When we're here, we appear to be beset by economic troubles, but tourists and travelers who come here, Sri Lankans tend to be a lot more defensive or pessimistic than people who come here. Assets, and general quality of life, the high level of, the human development indices and so on. So it doesn't take much to turn the country. We can literally, I say, turn on a dime, because it's still a relatively small economy. And, with new investment coming in, with tourism growing, because it's kind of been undiscovered also from a tourism perspective. We still get about 2 million tourists, which is, probably what Thailand gets in, I think, 3 weeks. We don't want to be at that level of getting flooded by tourists, but I think the tourism authorities also are planning a major repositioning drive to reprofile the country, not as a cheap destination, but something which is aspirational, because we have been underselling for the last decade or so. It should be positioned as an aspirational destination which attracts the top international brands. We don't have enough of them, and which helps across the chain, whether you're a homestay, whether you're a Airbnb. If you're a $30 beach shack, you should be able to get 40 or 50. If you're a Relais that's on 900, you should be able to get 1,500, because products of an equivalent quality in markets that are better positioned would get 30, 40, 50% more. So there's a bit of a Sri Lanka discount relating to the fact that the country hasn't been positioned. People who visited know what it is. So when I say it's an underrated gem, it's because the general perception, because we've never really reprofiled, positioned the country through public relations, through media, and through outreach, as I'm doing now, thanks to you. So I think that effort is underway. So in about 6 months, it should bear fruit. Budgets have been set aside, and all of us hoteliers and travel agents are really literally gagging for this campaign, because that's going to result in increased demand at better rates across the spectrum, wherever you are. It doesn't simply benefit the high end or the luxury, but it benefits across the range, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star. So I think once that happens, and once you get more travelers coming back in to discover the beauty of this country, and the many parts which really have been relatively untouched by tourism, because a lot of travelers have been sticking to kind of a well-worn circuit, and we've got to change that and distribute people across the whole country so you don't have areas that are over touristed. Then our tourism income will increase significantly. We'll have more foreign direct investment in terms of brands coming in, and those foreign brands themselves will reprofile, because if you look at so many destinations, the promotions are done by the brands that are there. It's not just the tourist boards that do the promotion. So I'm hopeful that we'll have more brands in the next couple of years. And we've been through bad situations before. We'll come out of it because we have, our people are resilient. It wasn't too long ago we had the Easter attacks. We bounced back from that, and we had the best ever high season following that, and then we had COVID. So hopefully third time lucky.
Fingers crossed. So would you say that the government's policies are generally tourism friendly? I mean, of course, they've been supportive now, but overall, is there something that you would like on a wish list? And also, I know that you have started something called the Sri Lankan Tourism Alliance. So could you tell us a little bit about that, and if you're lobbying for something special that would help the industry in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, I mean, the Sri Lankan Tourism Alliance is something that a few of us set up soon after the Easter attacks to communicate better that Sri Lanka was safe. It was really to boost everyone's confidence and do a rah-rah, and just to tell the travelers overseas and everyone to gather around something to kind of motivate and build confidence. And that I think worked quite well, to the point where a few of us sort of said, okay, let's formalize this, and it's set up now as a structure which focuses on sustainability, and we do communication, we do programs with the industry in terms of how do you develop your product in a sustainable manner, which is what the modern traveler is looking for. So that's really what the alliance does. Now, Sri Lanka tourism, I must say, of course, I might be a little bit biased because my wife is chair of Sri Lanka Tourism, and she had a Herculean task, because as soon as she came in, the COVID came in, and then I think they've done a very commendable job in terms of communicating, setting up the guidelines for our level 1 and the whole process by which foreign travelers visit. And it was viewed as a kind of a benchmark by other countries who followed suit in terms of creating these bio bubbles. And then similarly, we created these bio bubbles with India. So really, tourism has been, from a foreign tourism perspective, we've been open since February of 21. So it's been, if you look at the regional destinations, it's probably been the most mature, apart from the Maldives, which obviously has its natural advantage as one island, one hotel. But in terms of a single contiguous country, I think we were the first to open. So these rules and structures were very well organized. It was effective, and that's one reason why tourists are flooding in now, because we have a mature set of regulations and very high level of vaccinations. The government had a very strong and effective drive, to the point where almost 90% vaccinated. About 60 to 70% have had their booster, the Pfizer booster. So as a result, any tourist who's been fully vaccinated can arrive without any on-arrival testing or PCR at any point. You just have to meet the requirements for leaving wherever you're coming from. And sorry, there needs to be a pre-departure PCR testing to board the flight, but that's it. So that's one reason why tourism has come back strongly. December was a great month, I think, for most tourism providers, and the outlook for the rest of the year is positive. So I would say that tourism players here are bullish compared to where we were even 6 months or 3 months ago. We are in a much better place. We're hopeful that the momentum will continue. Some of our markets like China are still closed. India is open, and the restrictions that came in India with the 7-day home quarantine, I think people are taking it in their stride. It hasn't impacted arrivals too much, and hopefully that also will be lifted. So overall, personally, I'm optimistic, and my friends and colleagues in the trade that I speak to they're busy, and that's always a good sign. No longer hemorrhaging cash. I mean, one of the challenges we're dealing with, Priya, is kind of, we're losing staff to the region because, Qatar is getting ready for the World Cup and resorts openings in the region, in the Maldives and in Dubai and so on. But, people go and then they'll come back. So that's one of the challenges that hoteliers are dealing with. But I'm happy to say that we kept at Resplendent Ceylon. I made a pledge to my team at the very beginning, not knowing how long this was going to last. I thought 3 months, 6 months, that not a single one would lose their job. So all of them remained on the payroll. Not a single employee lost their jobs. Of course, about 10% level of service that Resplendent Ceylon and Relais Chateaux properties are famed for. And Indian guests are very fussy, you know that. And we've had a bunch of Indian travelers. We had a couple of fans with my friends in the travel trade soon after we opened in November, December. And, you know, we passed with flying colors, I'm happy to say.
Wonderful. So there's also something I was curious about. Is there, sort of a significance to using Ceylon as opposed to Sri Lanka? Because, I understand the difference between Mumbai and Bombay, because that's in our minds, Bombay is a state of mind. So is Ceylon also something like that?
Same. Yeah. Ceylon Sri Lanka was known as Ceylon till 1972. So for, centuries, it was known as Ceylon. And, the tea was popularized from around 1915, 1920. There was a strong branding campaign by the then Ceylon Tea Propaganda Board. So that was the best known commodity from this country. A lot of people knew Ceylon tea, Ceylon sapphire. So it was natural, like you said, Bombay, Mumbai, to continue with that. So that's why Ceylon tea is known as such. And when Resplendent Ceylon, when I was coming up with that brand name, Ceylon, okay, Sri Lanka, Resplendent Sri Lanka is a bit of a mouthful. Ceylon, trips off the tongue, and it's more romantic because you're talking about an era past. Now, it can cause confusion, but I think it's really that history and the fact that the country was positioned for generations in a very positive light using the word Ceylon. Sri Lanka in more recent decades, conflict, the unfortunate conflict we had, which obviously is now well over. There were a few negative connotations with Sri Lanka as well. So Ceylon kind of steered clear of that and kind of was more, it was more aspirational and no political connotations. So that's why you've got brands that use the word Ceylon. But Sri Lanka really is the way forward. And Sri Lanka means resplendent island. So that's how Resplendent came into our brand name.
Beautiful. So also Sri Lanka or Ceylon has become quite well known in the world of design, because even when I've visited, I've seen some really fabulous use of local materials, but in a very international format. I think people really recognize it, globally now. And even in the luxury space, I mean, you were talking about sort of rebranding it from a cheap destination to a luxury destination. So would you like to share some thoughts on how it can pivot and, what luxury offerings can be, which are not there already? I mean, obviously you all are doing something, but maybe in the culinary space, or it could be in design, it could be in something else. So is there something that you are sort of thinking for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think, everything we do in Sri Lanka it's small scale. We're not going to be massive like we have in India. So you've got a lot of, small entrepreneurs who are creating, amazing design with its fashion or handicrafts and, artisanal, products connected with our heritage and so on. So for resorts and tourism to connect with them. So right now I'm busy curating, because the resorts were on a low key during the pandemic, but now that things are virtually back to normal, curating our resort stores, shops. So I'm looking at connecting with local designers, who do amazing fashion wear with its stunning sarongs or spices or work in cane or artists and so on. So we have a very creative people. We've been exposed to, so many influences from, it really is a melting pot, as I said earlier. So I think that intersection of curating our design, our cuisine, presenting it. So for example, in the West, you had the Hopper's restaurant, which the Sethi family and my friend Karan Gokani, who ironically are Indian, but they showcased Sri Lankan cuisine in an amazing fashion in London, and now there are a couple of other restaurants, but our food wasn't positioned that way. So I think positioning our cuisine as we do at our resorts, with a modern interpretation, mixing Western ingredients with Sri Lankan techniques and spices and so on, and these, handicrafts, and then also to off the beaten track locations. I think that is really luxury. The new luxury. We were never into bling. I think bling as being part of luxury went out maybe 5 years ago. But I think the traveler who's looking for true luxury is looking for, amazing locations, off-grid, luxurious experiences in terms of aesthetics and what they can soak in, and just something that's a point of difference, that's curated, that's small scale, that's not off a production line. No buffets. Something curated to your preference, small experiences, and not something that's all bells and whistles, but something that's really charming and simple. So I think people just want to switch off. They're not too stressed about being away from the office. I would never think, going away for the weekend was sacrilege. Or whenever you got the Poya, whenever there's a full moon, it's a long, it's a holiday here. We've got more holidays than any other country in the world. And but now people are not feeling the slightest bit guilty because they can keep up with their work through Zoom or through Slack or whatever, WhatsApp, and yet have a holiday where they switch off. So I think people are looking for simplicity, for curation, for just, no decisions to be made that stays curated for them. So I think our food, our culture, how it's showcased, and of course, beautiful design in terms of the lodge or the hotel you're staying in, architecture, interior, it all has to come together, and that's really what I'm focusing on. I've got a great operations team that handles all that side of it, and to me that is modern luxury, and I think that's happening in so many countries around the world, and there are so many wonderful accommodation providers here and elsewhere that are doing that. And looking at India, following my friends on Instagram, you look at all these beautiful properties in India that I didn't know existed. It's stunning, right? Because Indians have found domestic travel, and you get all these remote lodges, and so I think that's what people want. Not to go to a 600-room property, which may have caviar and foie gras and butler service, but no, for me that's a total turn off.
Great. So that was Mr. Fernando telling us something really interesting, offering insights into Sri Lanka. Thank you so much. May I call you Malik at the end of the interview?
Please do.
Yes.
Please do, Priya. And come and visit us and see firsthand what I'm talking about. And I invite your viewers to get in touch if they have any Sri Lanka related question. Whatever I say and do, I have to first sell my country before I sell my resorts, because it has not been adequately promoted. Hopefully that's going to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a much greater awareness of Sri Lanka as a destination, even within India. And I've seen a lot of articles coming up, in the last 2 or 3 years, especially even during the pandemic. So yeah, definitely there'll be lots of Indians coming there. Be prepared.
Sri Lankan Airlines, India is the biggest single market for Sri Lankan Airlines. I think we touch so many, primary and secondary cities. The protocols are very easy in terms of arrival. Visa is instant online. So you can decide Friday afternoon, I want to go to Sri Lanka, and you can be there for dinner. And particularly, if you're going to places like Cape Veligamo, it's 2 hours on the highway from the airport. So I think that's where we appeal to Indians. No major planning like you go to Europe.
Yeah.
You can come several weekends in a row, and literally you're transported.
Fabulous. Thank you.